Diabo. Welcome back to Òrìṣà Speaks. You know, one of my favorite pastimes is reading, of course. I have a pretty big book collection, and I don't read much fiction. But the only fiction that I do read is comic books. I read a lot of Marvel, and I was asked in the past, what is your interest with Marvel? Why are you reading comic books? You know, some folks just really couldn't get into the whole thing, so to speak. And my reply, as I sat there and thought about it, was that I believe it's the origin stories of comic books that are extremely motivating. When you see or try to understand why an individual becomes devoted to a particular ideal or principle. And I believe it is this devotion that makes an individual more than a man or more than a woman. They're an icon of something. And let me give you an example. So, Tony Stark was a child of Howard Stark, of course, and Maria rather, and he acquired Stark Industries. They were a weapon manufacturer, and on his way to Vietnam, he was going to do some weapon sales. He ended up hitting a booby trap, and the result was a huge shrapnel that was launched into his chest, as they called the slow killer. So he knew he was going to die if he wasn't going to do anything about it, and he was actually captured with someone by the name of Jensen, who was already a famous professor, very successful. In the comic, it doesn't tell you why Jensen sacrificed his life as a diversion so that Tony Stark can continue to build this suit of iron and escaped. But in the movie, it kind of goes a little bit in depth by stating that Tony Stark was a man who was a playboy. He had, women, the cars, and, living this successful socialite life. But in the end, he really didn't have anything, right? He was a man with all the possessions that didn't have a family, that didn't have anything. And so Jensen said before he died, don't waste your life. Don't waste your talent. And as he died, I believe that was a point to where Tony Stark became more than an individual. He became Iron Man, this icon or this symbol of principles and values about using his technology to create peace and to try to promote a better world and use like sustainable, technology to help the planet and whatnot. Aurora Monroe, who was born of parents who came from a long line of Kenyan priestess and priests. Her parents were killed due to a Middle East conflict, Arabian-Israeli conflict. The plane was shot down, or it was a bombing rather, and she was befriended by street gangs. So she was taught how to be a thief, pickpocketer, and was skilled at it. She was like the number one thief until one day she picked the pockets of a wrong person, Charles Xavier, and he ended up creating an opportunity created to where she was able to escape and further travel throughout Africa. And even through those travels, she actually saved T'Challa before he was a Black Panther, aiding him by using her powers to manipulate the weather. So she slowly started coming into power and seeing that she came from a lineage of priestess, and she was also a very strong mutant, who they label her as an Omega mutant, one of the most powerful ones on the planet. But it just took someone to see value in her, to remind her who she was. And she devoted her life to using her power to aid other ethnicities in Africa and to be a leader of folks who can use their powers in a positive way. Last one is Peter Parker. And as you know, Peter Parker was bit by a spider. He was a scientist, and he was looking for money to buy a camera. So we entered this wrestling competition, and at this point, there was a robbery that was happening. This person ended up stealing a whole lot of money, and he ran right past them. And so the police officer stating like, hey, or the person who was there was stating, hey, you're a strong person. Like, why would you let this guy just walk away? And he just shrugged his shoulders and said, hey, it's not my problem. Later on that day, he ended up figuring that his uncle was murdered. And the same person that murdered his uncle was the person who he had the opportunity of stopping right then and there. And if he did, his uncle would have been alive today. So it was that point to where he became more than a man. He became more than Peter Parker. He became Spider-Man. And he devoted his life to looking after things around the neighborhood, to taking a stand against crime. And when we see that spider, or you see the Storm's headdress, or when you see the Iron Mask, is that we can tie principles to these characters. And I believe it's that devotion, that never wielding, that never ceasing devotion to a particular principle that makes an individual more than a human being. And to me, that was the inspirational message that I get from reading the Marvel comics. And those devotion to principles exist, of course, as you know, in reality. Let's flash back to, I think, the mid 80s, 1988. Adam Walsh was abducted out of a Sears department store. Parents were looking high and low, could never find the kid. It was a big search campaign to find this missing boy. And months later, they found the boy. Actually, they only found his head. He was found decapitated, and to date, his body was never found. And of course, this crushed the parents, as it would with any one of us who has children. So rather than spiraling negatively by getting into alcoholism or drugs or any type of self-destructive behavior, the father decided to become a victim's advocate and to make a stand so that no one else would have to feel that same pain again. And his father is John Walsh. And as you know, John Walsh was the icon of America's Most Wanted, a very successful television program that was back in the late 80s and early 90s. And to date, they have recovered 43 missing children. They have arrested 1,100 different criminals, and I believe it was 17 of them that was actually on the real FBI's most wanted list. So at this point, this devotion made John Walsh more than just a single individual. It had attracted several different people to help, and several different people who believed in the same principles, to make a change so that no one else would have to feel that same pain again. Les Brown was born in an abandoned building, and Les Brown's biological mother was impregnated while her husband was away at war, and she didn't want him to know that she actually gotten pregnant or had a full affair while he was gone. So she gave birth to the babies. They were twins in an abandoned building, and had someone else raise them. And as they were raised, of course, going through such a hard time in poverty in Liberty City, Miami, Les Brown was labeled edugably mentally retarded. And despite having that label, despite growing up in poverty, despite not knowing his biological mother or father, he still pressed on to become, more than likely, I think, the most successful, and this is just not me saying that, the most successful business coach and the most successful motivational speaker on the planet. And he has several different other accomplishments that he made as well. So I highly recommend watching the videos that he posted for free on YouTube, called Les Brown Speaks at the Georgia Dome, or Les Brown It's Possible. David Goggins, horrible domestic bring up, such a tough time at home, called nigga almost every day at school, getting death threats on the regular, was obese, and was going down a downward spiral of depression, up until he decided to make a change in his life. So David Goggins is probably listed, at least here in the Western America, as one of the toughest men alive. He has completed several different endurance trainings that no one else was able to do so. He has the Guinness World Record for pull-ups, completing almost 4,000 in 17 hours. And he was the only member of the armed forces to complete SEAL training, including 2 Hell Weeks, the U.S. Army's Ranger School, where he graduated and enlisted as a man of honors, and then also as an Air Force Tactical control training. And to give a little bit of background about that, you can actually die in these trainings, and he's the only man to complete all of them. And the most toughest man alive, and he attributes to having a strong mentality. And to paraphrase, he stated that, if you look at people who became successful, there are people who were either paraplegic, there are people who were adopted, there are people who were men, people who were women, people who were black. Everyone comes from some type of background of adversity, but it's the mentality in their mind that determined if they were going to be successful or not. He attributes all of the success to, as he says, putting calluses on the mind, to constantly going to work every day on your mind and pushing yourselves beyond these limits. And that is how you become more than an individual. So I would highly recommend checking out David Goggins on the impact theory, and that's what, of course, that's posted. They posted that for free on YouTube as well. Now, when we're looking at these different principles and these different men and women and what they achieve, coming from Christianity as a child, you would think that these principles don't really exist. You would see that, God, he created things quite easily, and his presence is almost ambiguous. Jesus almost seems flawless in everything that he does. He only got mad once when, the money changers were trying to manipulate the currency in the temple, but besides that, he's pretty smooth. But we don't hold the same idea in Isese. Of course, as above, so below. And so we're learning from different experiences of the deities. And sometimes when individuals will look at perfection, or they look at themselves and what they will achieve, I think that sometimes people may give up, or they may have a misunderstanding about the human nature or what it means to be a human. In actuality, we can save ourselves, and who we are, nothing is going to control our outcome besides what we think about ourselves. Our thoughts and our consistent attitude in the end is going to determine where we end up in life. Orisa goes through the same learning process, and they're learning and they become icons. They are icons. They are a set of principles and values that people devote their lives to. Now, I've heard several different stories of this account, and this is from Ejila Ashebor. This is a Odu from the 16 Kari divination corpus, and this story recounts as Obatala left Arun and started to create Aye. So the story states that as these Orisha were leaving, that it was nothing but watery mass, and Obatala was creating from the primordial mountain. So as he was coming down, certain aspects of the earth were starting to be created. Obatala got thirsty, and he rested his cutlass upon a tree, and he saw that liquid was coming out of this tree. And so he started to drink the sap, not knowing that it was palm wine. And I guess slowly after a while, he was drinking and drinking and drinking. He got drunk and fell asleep. Orunmila, and this is an account to this Odu. Now there's several different accounts of this story. Ifa may have something similar, but we're going off of what I've received from Obatala's perspective. So Orunmila drank a little bit, but he was able to shake it off, and some other deities were drinking as well. But Obatala was drunk and just passed out, went to sleep, and he woke up and he was looking for his creative implements, and he seen that Orunmila had it. Long story short, at the end of the story, he retained his implement, and he swore that he'll never drink to this day. So deities do make mistakes because they're going through this learning process. But with Obatala, he made it a point that he failed because of drinking, and he never drunk again. This is something that all Obatala priestesses and priests have this taboo. I take it a little bit further. Since I don't drink any alcohol, it doesn't really matter what it was. If it was gin, wine, rum, whatever, if he would have drunk any of that, he would have been drunk and the same results would have happened. So I don't think that it's just palm wine. I take it to the max where I don't drink any alcohol or take any type of intoxicants that will inhibit me from doing my function. There's an essay from Obatala that states a time to where Obatala was waging war. In the Òrìṣà, it says that Obatala is the one of Iwakwele, but yet Obatala is the one who has an unexhaustible strength and will go in the river already swinging batons, ready to fight, and that he's a very fearsome god. So Obatala has peace, a peace-like mentality. He doesn't argue. He doesn't, he's not really contemporary. But when it's time for war, a justifiable war, this is the deity that you go to war, whose name that you go to war in. So Obatala was divining as he was going to war, and it was said that that black garment, something similar to what you see Ogun priestess and priest, a black garment with talisman and charms and all different types of magical implements, you need to sacrifice that before you go to war. And he thought to himself, why in the world will I give up this magical talisman and these things do magic? I've seen stuff where people are shooting AK-47s in their mouth and they're just spitting out the bullets. There's a whole bunch of magic that is just, I'm at loss for words that you'll find in Yoruba land. So he thought to himself, it's pointless. I will not give this up. So he refused. Before Obatala even left the house, everyone who he went to war with died. And when he was going out and he was looking on the battlefield, he saw all the bodies of the people that were supposed to be his colleagues. And he swore to himself, at that day, I will never wear any color but white again, and I will never wear black again. And it's a whole lot of coded messages that's behind that white and white cloth. And today, Obatala, all of his followers, this is how you can distinguish us from any other devotee, are white beads, white clothes. Not all, but some, depending on what was told during the initiation, has the taboo of wearing any other color but white. So Obatala became an icon of ethical, ritual, and moral purity. Obatala is the source, and he is just that icon of absolute power, absolute fearsome power, the fear that puts the fear of God into people, but yet it's ethics and those morals and those purities behind that. And this icon and this representation and these values is what I hold on and what I will continue to practice. So we become more than an individual. We become the collective ashe that is behind that deity's principle. There's another story that I'll get into briefly about Obatala and one of his wives, Igbin. It said that Obatala had 201 wives. Onje, the medal that we wear, is one of his wives. As well, principal wife is Iya Yemu. And Igbin was going to have an affair against Obatala. And sexuality is a little bit different from what's here in the West. There is sexual discipline in African culture. It's not really like this here in the West. So monogamy isn't necessarily a thing, but yet it's the agreement that the individuals have, which makes something in or out of law. So she was going to run away with this man, and they were going to do it, go and leave and have sex and run away, and I think they're going to marry as well. And so as they were thinking about it, they just thought about it, like, you know what? If we do this, like, we're dead. Like, we're not only dead, but, like, we're dead. Like, we're dead twice. Obatala has this energy to where not only will you cease to exist on this plane, you'll cease to exist in the spirit plane, so you won't exist anywhere. Like, he has this strange power. So they thought like, man, we shouldn't do this. Let's go and apologize. Let's go and apologize. They went to Obatala, went outside of his house, and they were begging for forgiveness. And and he thought, hey, I like that sound. I like that sound. And he touched her head, and she turned into a drum. And the name of the diviner, I may be paraphrasing, the name of the diviner on this essay states that one day of indiscretion will ruin you for the rest of your days. Now, I think that this essay has a whole lot of wisdom that's inside of it. And there's several essays to where Obatala, or at least another one that I can think of, experienced adultery as well. Even Ogun, his wife had committed adultery against his own son, and he wanted to execute her. Is that it teaches you it teaches you sexual discipline, and maybe the shortcomings of the lack of reciprocity with inside polygamous relationships, but it also speaks about devoting to do the right thing. Now, Igbing didn't even get a chance to do the sexual act, but her life was ruined for the rest of her days. So I think that turning her into a drum means that discipline is music to the ears of Obatala. That's that icon, and even within her shortcomings, she became an icon. She became a representation of morals that we still use today, to venerate Obatala. These values, they don't die. People who see individuals who uphold certain principles and values, other people become inspired by those same values, and they still live on. I think this is why they say Orunmila doesn't have any arms or any feet, because people carry him throughout time. People carry the wisdom of Orunmila throughout time. Just like, and bear with me because I'm a sci-fi fan, in The X-Files, as you see Fox Mulder going through this pursuit of truth and justice, and a high-ranking person wanted to assassinate him, and some of his people wanted to assassinate Fox Mulder, and he stopped them. And he says, if you kill this one man, this one man's mission can turn into another man's crusade, because they knew that this man wasn't going to stop until he found out the truth. And if somebody else would have assassinated him, it would inspire a whole generation of people to avenge this person and to be sure that his truth lived. And this brings back a scenario to where I was preparing for initiation, and it was a very stressful moment. We were getting ready to go, getting everything situated. I believe it was less than 2 days to leave, and then the visa still, was supposed to come about 2 to 3 days ago, and I was, wasn't sure if I was going to make it in time. So I saw this this Muslim woman, this black Muslim sister. She had her, hijab on. That's why I knew she was Muslim, and she self-identified. So she pulled me to the side, like, hey, can I speak to you a minute? And I thought to myself, oh, here we go, And so she said, hey, I don't say this about everybody, but you have this huge light around you, and I know you're gonna think I'm crazy. I'm like, no, because I recall a couple of months prior, it was this white man who was carrying this Native American stuff, and he just stopped me out of anywhere and said, I see this really big aura around you, this really big light. It's really beautiful. I don't know what you are, what you're doing. Just keep doing it. And I thank them for that motivation to continue to do the right thing and continue to operate as I know I should, despite several amount of adversity and certain types of stress and negativity. So she was stating that this light is like, I see like a whole lot of ancestors behind you, and she says that I don't know what it is or what you're doing, but you're being supported by your ancestors, and don't stop. And she gave me some more warnings and some things to look out for, but that word of wisdom, it stuck with me, because I really feel that once we pick up on our old ways and we pick up of things that have been in existence for quite some time, we are supported by all of the ancestors who devoted their lives to this cause, so we don't walk alone, even though it looks like we are. You have the community of Shango behind you, or Olokun behind you, or Yemoja behind you, or Orisha I am behind you, Oba, Oya, Oshoshin, whichever Orisha you devoted to, you have that community behind you. You have your ancestors behind you. They've been around for quite some time, and that really changed my perspective of being more than an individual, of being more than just at that time just Sarah, that I became an icon to principles, to icons, to certain types of values that I just wouldn't stop. What my origin story is I had some time. It took some time for me to find the truth. So of course I left any type of Western religion, and I was into, I got into metaphysics, and I was trying to read the truth about the world and about nature and creation. And it wasn't until I had series of dreams, so where ancestors came through and spoke clear Yoruba to me, and I didn't. Of course, I wasn't fluent at the time, but I understood everything that they were saying in my dreams, and they were leading me back. I had dreams where Obatala came and showed me some things, and those things either are clear in my mind to this day, and things I will never forget, things that won't be able to be accomplished without devotion to him. And he showed me some things that are coming, and in pursuit of that, I was looking high and low, and I could not find that source. I knew of priests who did not do the ethical thing, although they were well known. I knew people who were promote themselves as giving icons to certain Orisha, even though they didn't have the authority to do so. I knew people that were engaging into some type of other magic with discarnate spirits and misappropriate them as divinities to the public. I knew women who would try to influence me in my sleep or in my dreams. I knew people who used sex magic and all this unethical stuff to control people or to do bad things to individuals. I knew a whole lot of malevolence, and these were high-ranking people, I guess, in my community. I know people who said that, who have been molested or been, for lack of better words, raped by men in power, stating that to appease Shango or to appease the god, you have to have sex with them. I know of and heard stories of high-ranking people who molest children and practicing a form of Satanism in African, cloaked in African aesthetics. And I told myself I want nothing of this. I told myself that there has to be at least one person here that will lead me to where I want to go. And if I have to do this by myself, I will. I was devoted. I did not stop until I found the truth. And I would have my beads, of course, or I would have my I would always wear white because Obatala showed himself to me, and I would wait until he gave me more directions, until the ancestors gave me more directions, until this one day, I took my at this point it was just just a single dad, and I had my 3 kids, and we went to the zoo, and my son found $20 on the floor, and he was being really loud, like, "Hey, Dad, I found $20." I was like, "Okay, well, let's see if anybody else is going to claim it. Then, if not, I'll give you guys ice cream." Nobody saw it, so we went to get some ice cream. As I sat and I waited there, another sister by the name of Alade and her husband came by, and our Kamal names were very similar. And she asked me, "Hey, did you know?" And I thought I was looking for a community. And she said, "Hey, well, do you know Baba Kola? Well, he's here in D.C." I was like, "No, I don't know who that is." He's like, "You know who Wande and Bimbo is?" Like, "Yeah, like I think I heard of some of his books. I read a few." And she ended up hooking me up, and then I found Ifa University, and here I am. So I told myself, no one should have to go through that to know the truth or to serve their divinity. No one should have to be exposed to predators, had to be exposed to malevolence or incompetent charlatans to do the right thing. That was the point where I became more than an individual. That there's nothing that anyone can do to stop me. There is nothing that anyone can do to get in the way of me making sure that Obatala lives here. There is no fear that anyone can place into me. There's nothing that no one can corrupt me. There's nothing that anyone can do to get me off of this path. I cannot be corrupted. Nothing. I devoted myself to that path so that no one else would have to go through that path. So I ask you, what is your origin story? What is the thing that you came through? What is the thing that you grew through? And how are you going to become a symbol, an icon of that, and make sure that everyone behind you has success? And I'll leave this with you today. It was a scene, and bear with me because I am a comic book fan. It was a scene in The Avengers, The Age of Ultron, to where Hawkeye was in this abandoned building in I think it was in like Russia or something like that, Sokovia, and the Scarlet Witch came in, and she was who's a very, very powerful individual. So she was kind of scared and was kind of upset with herself that she was actually responsible for some of the things that happened, and because of course, as you know, the Scarlet Witch started as a villain. So Hawkeye said like, hey, I don't really care about what you did. I don't care about, the past. It's like, we're in here, we're fighting robots. I only got a bow and arrow. It sounds crazy. He's like, you can stay in there if you want to. I'm not going to do anything to you. But if you leave here, you become an Avenger. If you leave, you become someone different. So let me know what you're going to do because I can't babysit you. So I say that to you as well. We all have negativities. We all have done some things that we're not proud of. Now, are you going to wallow around in that? Or are you going to step forward and be an Orisa? If you haven't done so already, I would say go to Eshu. You give your sacrifices to Eshu to make up for the things that you have done and accept whatever happens. But from that point, like Obatala, do not make the same mistake. Leave all that in the past. Move forward as an Orisa. Until next time, Ariel or Dabo.